all this talk about women in honeypots and whatnot, you know, sex for secrets, that type of thing. Well, I'm sure that happens, but not as much as you think. Women can get whatever they want without doing a whole lot. That's non-vertical power. They're walking balls of latent power. Having them at a critical position across a control grid can cause disaster or chaos, or you can do anything you want with effective networking techniques, and they're already doing it. It's just you were at a time, you know, where women come into organizations. In let's say America, you know, women were pulled in over feminism, and I'm going to go into a whole detailed story, an actual story, and they were pulled in over feminism. And they're sitting at, now all of a sudden they're all in there, and then they work their way up in these critical positions. They're not PowerPoints. You don't see them. They're not executive vice presidents or presidents or CEOs. Not that that means a whole lot. If you're at a critical point, if you're at a control point, some of those control points are actual choke points. You can do anything you choose to do if you choose to do it, if you choose to exercise power. And heaven forbid a handful of them get together, because that's usually what it takes, is more than one. But and there's nothing illegal about it. No, there's nothing illegal about exercising power, or, you know, as long as you don't break any rules. You know, there's nothing illegal about it. Most of you have had someone get you a job. Maybe some of you need someone to get you a job. Well, I'm going to tell you a very funny story, and I'm going to go into that next. And this is kind of just, you know, I'm trying to tell it to you in a roundabout way. But I want you to use your imagination and think about what's in front of you and how many white women you see at control points or critical points. Not necessarily power points, although they're there now. I'm talking about control points and critical points. Because when I mention white women are fearless, I mean, that's an all or nothing phrase. I don't know whether it was a social engineering or whatnot, but I'm going to go into the exact story on how this type of thinking came about several years ago. I'll be back with you in a minute. So now I'd like to tell you a story. I'd like to tell you a story about young Mr. Q. Young Mr. Q was a very bright young man, and apparently he had worked for an agency, and he got out of the agency and got a very good offer from a group of investment companies run by what we will call the Three Wise Men. And the Three Wise Men hired him for a particular reason. They hired him to kind of find a unique solution to a challenge that they had in front of them. You see, they wanted to get people jobs at different groups. And now I guess Mr. Q became an investment analyst for him. How could that be an investment? Well, that's a good investment for you to analyze. If you can get a friend job at the local fire department, that may be a great investment for you down the road. But anyways, he was hired as an investment analyst, and his job was to help get people jobs at various different corporations, entities, whatever. I don't know specifics, but that's irrelevant. One of the challenges they were having is that the traditional networks that they had operated in, we'll label them the old boys networks, had a kink in it. It wasn't bad or good. They just didn't know the fastest way around this kink. And that kink was that you now had all these women, Aryan girl rabbits, white women in these control points, at these critical points that were hired in under women's rights and whatnot. And they knew that, you know, the glass is going to be half empty, but the glass is also going to be half full. Maybe there'll be a unique solution, whatever. And there's one particular instance, you know, they had these, I believe it was like 5 women, all these critical points, that could hire every single one of their guys or girls that they wanted to get in or whatever. And they were trying to get them resumes, and they were all very well qualified and whatnot. And this was, in this instance, I don't know whether it was a corporation or whatever, that's irrelevant. But young Mr. Q, that was his first assignment. And young Mr. Q analyzed it, and Mr. Q walked in and he presented it to the Three Wise Men. And he said, well, you know, his theory was, and the Three Wise Men's theory, that white women have to have a great deal of power because race is real, but they're not going to exercise it along the same pathway. They can't be men. You know, women's rights told them that you could be men. Well, you can't. But at the same time, there's some interesting things that they could do. So young Mr. Q made his presentation. He was going to keep it very simple. He just said, I'm going to do something non-traditional. I'm just going to approach them regularly. We're going to tell them what we're about, and we're going to keep it very, very simple. And I'll go into that. I'll go into the direct approach. But the three wise men looked at him. Two of them nodded and said, "Yeah, well, I guess try it. We'll see what happens. I mean, we don't have any other great ideals, and definitely non-traditional." He was going to use a very non-traditional approach that they had never used before. But you're not dealing with men. And one of the wise men was, said, "Well, maybe simple will be best." Two of them basically doubted it, and one of them didn't know. So, Mr. Q found out that these women, there's 5 women, they all hang out at this one local eatery, bar, whatever, and they already have a little network to themselves, like most white women on the job. Yeah, if you go to any place that has a lot of white women, there's going to be a clique of them. Some of them will fight, some of them won't, but there'll be a clique of them that get along quite well. It's like anything else. At that time, there was a lot of pressure because there were a lot of men in other positions, so they were getting along very well. So, Mr. Q went up to these women at their place where they hang out and have afternoon, after dinner, whatever, afternoon tea or whatever. And he went up and he sat down and introduced himself. He told them what he was about. He told them that he would make them an offer that they couldn't refuse. And of course they laughed, because here's a young man and he's going to make them an offer that they couldn't refuse. He said, "I'm going to teach you how to exercise power." And they got pretty quiet, and they said, "Mr. Q, we don't have any power." And he says, "Oh, no, you got more power than anything on this planet." He's like, you just never been taught how to exercise power. You see, you think you got to move up to achieve any of your objectives. You think you got to exercise power like male. He's like, "No, you don't have to do that." He's like, you can do. He's like, "You don't understand, Mr. Q." These women says, we don't have any power. He's like, "Listen." He's like, "I'd like each one of you to do this little drill here. We're going to go through a little exercise, and I'm going to show you what kind of power you have." And he gave each one of them a little notebook. There was 5 of them. He gave 5 of them each a little notebook, kind of like a little Lego pad or something. And he gave each one of them a pen. He's like, "On the first page, I would like you to write down everything you could do from your position right now to tomorrow morning to destroy your organization or company." And they kind of laughed. And they did the drill, and they wrote down all these things. And he was like, "Now I'd like you to turn the page over." He's like, "I'd like you to write down everything you could start doing tomorrow morning to destroy your organization or company and not get caught." And they kind of laughed. They laughed pretty hard. They started writing things down. That took a few minutes. And then he sat down and read over all their things, and he was shocked. They had thought of things that most men could never even dream of. But then again, if you've ever had a lady in your life that had it in for you, you know the story. But in reading over these things, they became shocked too, that they had a great deal of power that they could exercise if they chose to exercise it. So that kind of got their attention. And he went over his ideals, some of the ideals, not necessarily the same terminology I use, but the ideals that we're coming up with about non-vertical and vertical power. I gave you my terminology. His terminology wasn't, that wasn't his terminology then, but that's the terminology I use now. He taught them about non-vertical and vertical power. He taught them about how that they exercise power by basically running rabbits, on how to use basic networking skills, this network that they already had from critical points to achieve objectives. And one of them wanted to make a lateral move into another position. One of them wanted to raise. One of them wanted to, she could play hardball. But 4 out of the 5 could play lady ball, and one of them could play hardball. And he gave them simple tactics and techniques that they already use. Problem, reaction, solution. He taught them how to demoralize a department. Yeah. How to do more. One of them was in human resources. He said, you could hire a bad apple into this department that you want to demoralize. He gave them ideals and tactics, things that they already do and already know. He just gave them different ideals on how to keep it simple and how to achieve objectives without ever having to move anywhere, but by concentrating on we's instead of the me's. And they already had a we together. They already had a network. They even had code words. Women always had code words for things. And so he taught them that. And he said, the only thing in return I want to do for helping you is, if you so choose to, I would like you to look at these resumes for all these positions coming up. In other words, this woman in human resource had several positions to fill right now, and she could look at anyone's resume she wanted. And he said, all my big jackrabbits